Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 315 for Monday, September 16th, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version on YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixelriffs, and joining us in crisp, high fidelity is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello. Crisp high fidelity. Oh, right. Sorry. How's that?
And there he is. Yes. Always a delight to welcome a new tech setup into the fold here.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a learning curve this weekend, but I did a couple of test streams and I got the new camera sorted. So all the talk in the render distance last week about the new additions to the studio have come to pass. And I am now looking at the new Sony ZV-E10 that I'm using for video podcasting, which is very cool. And I appreciate all of the support on Spawn Chunks and on my own personal Twitch channel, because it allows me to expand the studio in this way and hopefully gives you, the Spawn Chunks viewers on YouTube, a better experience. And the render distance, by the way, for folks that might be wondering, is the extended version of the podcast. That's where Johnny and I talk about all kinds of stuff, sometimes outside of Minecraft, sometimes it is an extended Minecraft conversation. That's available at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. This week we talked a little bit about some home renovations happening on Johnny's end, a little bit about the studio changes here for me, and also Satisfactory dropped their 1.0 release, and I have been playing a lot of that. So there's a lot of factory talk in the render distance. The other things that you get when you are a patron are the extra bonus podcasts that we do. Sometimes we do the end Saturday of the month. We hang out with our patrons. We do a monthly hangout. We talk about what they've been doing in Minecraft, different build trends, often something that trends with the new updates, new blocks, that kind of thing. And those are video, or not video, but they have like screenshots that go along with them in the Discord for reference later. They're posted to our Patreon for our members, and folks get to listen to all that kind of stuff if you support at patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
So Satisfactory has obviously taken up a lot of your time this weekend, as we were talking about in the render distance, but you have managed to fit in at least one Minecraft stream this week. So what's new on the Citadel?
Well, unfortunately, the last time I played on the Citadel, I logged out without turning off the moss farm, and that broke the moss farm. So the Moss Farm retrofit became a Moss Farm mechanic event where essentially what happens is there's a bunch of pistons creating a stone generated platform, and the moss is used to bone meal that stone. The stone turns into moss and other moss related bits, and then as the pistons continue to push forward the feed, it breaks the moss that gets sent into a water stream. But what happens when the timing of that is off is that the lava turns the water into cobblestone instead of stone. And then it also will push the trapdoors out of alignment that control the water stream that is every so often released to remove all of the floating moss bits that are on top of the platforms. And so I'll include some screenshots of the farm, mostly just because it looks really cool, but you kind of get a really solid look at like where the platforms are and what happens with the lava and whatever. And I had to fix that. It's not a hard fix. It's just tedious because like you have to remove the lava, you have to remove all the blocks, you have to put the trapdoors back where they go, you have to put it back in again. And if you don't do it right and you miss one or you forgot to remove a piece of cobblestone, then that becomes a problem because, of course, cobblestone doesn't turn into anything if you use it as a bone meal subject next to moss. It just stays the way it is. So you have to go through and remove all that kind of stuff. I did manage to get it done. Thankfully, the farm has an on-off switch. The on-off switch is unfortunately very far away from the farm, so like there's a lot of running back and forth. But once I got it going, that was fine. And it was good to kind of have a video explanation of how it actually works. So on my latest stream, which is up on Joel Duggan VODs on YouTube, that the very first thing we did was have to fix it. So if you're curious about how the farm works, you'll get a good look at the inner workings of it by watching the first few minutes of the stream. But then I switched over to my decoration of the storage and redstone area of the farm. And I'm trying to expose the redstone by landscaping the mountain down and kind of carving a lot of it away. The redstone looks cool. I want to put it behind some green glass, have kind of like a green roof, kind of a mossy roof on it, kind of tied into the moss farm. I'm using the same kind of blocks. There's honey blocks and green glass and dark oak that's both like stripped or the dark oak wood that has the bark left on it. I'm not super happy with the way it is right now. I didn't really have a solid plan. I kind of went in off the cuff and just started exposing things and leaning into the shapes that I was seeing. Right now, it kind of looks like an office building, and it's not my favorite. So what I would like to do is, I think I have to artificially add some depth. So where I've got the glass kind of in front of a couple things, I think I need to like add some extra room in there. I think I need to not expose maybe the drop shafts and a few other things. That brute force observer thing that I mentioned before is also exposed. I think I maybe have to cover that up. It will look better when I get to the landscaping part of it, where I can start to take the mossy cobble and tuff and kind of like blend what's happening into the hillside. It's a very distinct like line happening right now between like where the build is popping out of the hill and where it's not. And I'm also trying to decide like what I want to expose and what I don't want to expose at the top. So it's still a work in progress. I do like the fact that I can see it now. I like having more color in that area, and it helps with like what was just a massive flat gray face of a mountainside. So I'm liking where it's going. It's just that it's a little bit frustrating to just not quite get it where I wanted to by the end of the stream, but another stream or two, and I'm sure I'll have it sorted out.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I think the last section of that landscaping process is going to do a lot to renew your confidence in it, right? Like, it's always the last 5% of detail that sells 95% of the build when it comes to, like, we just add a couple of bushes here and suddenly this thing looks like it's been here forever, right? So I think that's probably going to be part of it. But yeah, I think it looks so cool next to the iron farm now that you have this, like, cohesive green and, like, dark wood logs kind of like the whole aesthetic of that area feels a lot more unified now, and I think landscaping and removing the mountains behind there and making it feel a bit more developed is going to have a lot to do with that.
Thanks. Yeah, I like the way that it's matching up. I think that I'm going to use the same sort of lessons I've learned with the moss farm to maybe address the entrance to the storage system for the iron farm. Maybe not expose it per se, because it's a nice little cave inside, but the door that goes into the iron storage area looks just like the door for the moss area. And what I should do is change it to be having maybe some of the more of that copper color as opposed to the brown, and have it look like maybe it's attached to the iron farm, so that you can very distinctly see, oh, the iron farm with the door attached to it, that's where I go to get iron, and then vice versa for the moss. The only thing about the moss that I think is sticking out for me is, like, I feel like for the people that might be seeing the screenshots on screen or later on our website, thespawnchunks.com, it's the top back kind of third. The front I like the kind of bold box with the green color, the moss hanging over the top. I can switch that to be azalea leaves or something a little bit more organic, maybe with some glowberries, but it's the back part that feels very boring to me right now. So I'm still working on that. But I agree. I think that front part is really going to sing once I decide how I'm going to landscape it and add some bushes and some overlapping textures, and all the lessons I've learned over the last 3 years in West Hill really come in handy for stuff like this. So I've done cliffs, I've done riverbanks, I've done all kinds of things. And this is just like, I don't even have to think about how to landscape this. I know what I'm going to do. It's just that it's the overall shape design of the top part that's struggling.
It's funny how your aesthetic eye changes when you've been working on like one project for so long, and then you come back to something else and you're like, wow, I have like a ton of different things I can do to this. That's super fun. It's something that I've found works for me now. I'm building roofs, because I used to hate doing roofs for a really long time. And now I'm working on the Necromansion, as we dubbed it last week on the podcast, nice. on a fantasy Minecraft SMP. And I'm finding the roof of this thing way easier now that I've worked on some stuff in Survival Guide Season 3 in my starter area, and also building the roof on the museum that I built in Empires Season 2. And I've started to get more of an appreciation for like the shapes of roofs and different styles, and just a couple of aesthetic elements that blend together and look really good. I always used to hate doing roofs with a really steep incline, and now I'm understanding how that works with a certain scale of build to make it really feel like it's more part of the build, instead of super exaggerated fantasy house where the walls are only 4 blocks high and the roof is like 15 above that, you know? Like, it works for some aesthetics, but not for all of them. And in this one, I wanted a nice mix of, this could look like a perfectly like ordinary build in a different block palette, but with this block palette I've chosen with a black stone roof and these brimwood walls, and it looks kind of spooky and foreboding, I'm still trying to zone in on that sort of Addams Family mansion aesthetic, but not all black and white, you know? It's not super high contrast, like, you know, monochrome with everything else that's going on in this quaint little RPG town. It's a little bit more like it's trying to fit in with the neighbors. But I managed to get some interior stuff done this week, as well as expanding the outside. And I'm working on interior sort of simultaneously with the exterior, so I don't build the inside to a certain set of dimensions and then find myself lacking space for all of the modded shenanigans I need to do on the inside. But my storage room has been working out okay so far. I haven't gone in for any kind of automated storage because I'm trying to really get familiar with what's in all of the mods, and so I'm trying to categorize it instead of just shoving it all in like a searchable inventory. And so I have it divided up into some chests are just different mods, some chests are like all of the different ores that are in all of the different mods that add new materials to the game, some of it's organic, so I've got a wood chest on one side that's the vanilla woods, and I know what all of those are, and then on the other side, the same chest in the same, like, 3x4 of double chests I've got in the same location is modded wood, and that's got a ton of wood types that I've never even seen before and still want to play around with. So it's nice to have, like, an inventory that is logical side by side with a vanilla inventory, but contains all of the stuff that I have absolutely no idea how it functions yet. I'm also working on a room that's more of a library, because obviously this kind of creepy old mansion sort of deserves a library full of magical books and that kind of thing. This is a 1.20 mod pack, so chiseled bookshelves are very much a thing, and they even have a mod in there that allows you to see the title or the enchantment on a book whenever you hover over it in the chiseled bookshelf, so that makes it a lot easier to see what I have. And I've also split that into vanilla versus modded as well, because there's some modded enchantments that are just completely wild in this, especially with the focus on magic. So I'm working on that, working on a bit of interior detail. There are some really great additions in, I think, the handcrafted mod, which adds a lot of furniture and stuff. There's a couple of pieces of that add pillar trims and corner pieces that I've used to frame out windows last week that I'm now using for interior structure this week. So there's a kind of like, I guess you'd call it like coving or something, like the kind of interior decor where there's molding on the ceiling and kind of around the walls and stuff, connecting up different features of it, so I can hang chandeliers from points where it kind of crosses over and like joins up with the pillars that are reaching up the walls. And those are made out of dripstone, but dripstone that is carved in such a way that it doesn't really resemble its former self anymore. So that's kind of an interesting use of that material that you don't get in vanilla, because right now it's really just a block and pointed dripstone and that's it. So I'm finding fun ways that the mods have used materials that I'm more familiar with to get effects that I can do in modded but can't really do as well in vanilla. The chandeliers are held up by iron tables that are just glued to the ceiling because I figured I needed some sort of like wrought iron looking handle kind of thing for the chandelier. I didn't want the look of a hopper where everything looks so solid. I wanted it to look kind of ornate and like cast iron and intricate, but still within the 16 by 16 kind of textures that they try and stick to in the Fantasy Minecraft mod pack. So I found iron tables, dangled some chains from those, and then added a separate chandelier item that was added in the mod pack. And I thought that gave like exactly the right sort of vibe I wanted. Outside of decoration, though, I've been diving into some of the other dimensions that are in this mod pack when the occasion calls for it. And one of my favorite things I found, I went into the Deeper and Darker mod, which actually adds a dimension through that portal at the center of ancient cities. And the dimension itself I found kind of disappointing, to be honest with you. Like, it really, it feels like a reskin of the Nether. It's a cavernous biome with like a lot of very similar terrain. There's a lot of trees in there, but the trees are just sort of like reskinned oak trees, more or less. Like, they're more like the giant oaks that grow multiple branches. I didn't find those particularly interesting. There are a couple of structures that mostly seem to be like buried in the landscape, so you have to go digging to search for them, and I didn't find that especially inspiring gameplay. And the only thing you need to be aware of is that because it's linked to the Deep Dark, there are some other mobs around that listen to vibrations in the same way that the Warden does, and they come after you and like melee attack you that way. But they really just seem to be kind of like, they behave sort of like zombies. They're the same kind of mentality of like, they just walk up to you and they hit you over and over again. And there isn't the same kind of like stealth, don't let it hear you kind of gameplay as there is with the Warden. You just have to be either tanky enough to fight one, or you have to be agile enough to run away. So I mostly ignored them on my way to this structure, and then spent like a very fraught couple of minutes inside this structure trying to fight off all of the Wardens that spawned as I looted the place, which Wardens, difficult in a very narrow environment. They had a huge amount of HP because the mod pack adds a leveling system that actually increases the HP of certain enemies once you get into like the harder areas of the game or dimensions. And so I was basically having all of my Necromancer minions fight the Warden while I kind of ran around and tried to dive into the chests. But I came out with something that's effectively a walkie-talkie item that you can link to a vanilla inventory. So it's effectively like dial a chest, basically. And so instead of having a furniture mod kind of thing where you plug it into a whole bank of chests and you can search the inventory, instead it just links to a single vanilla double chest, and you can open that and close that remotely. And I found that, for whatever reason, way more compelling than the big searchable list of every item that you've obtained in the game, because then I thought, well, I can have that up on the roof with me and use this walkie-talkie kind of thing to open that chest to grab all of my building materials out of. And as long as it's loaded, as long as it's within, chunk ticking distance, then it's always going to be active, which means I can also add a hopper refilling all of the blocks that are in that inventory from a much larger inventory that the walkie-talkie can't link to because it's not compatible with the chest mod that provides. So I have a mithril chest with like, I don't know how many, like 150 inventory slots in it, feeding into a vanilla double chest using a hopper, and that's filling in all of the dripstone blocks and blackstone that I'm using for the roof and the brimwood that I'm using for the walls. And like all of that is now stored in one place. So when I'm up on the roof, I can dial up whatever it is I need and grab it into my inventory, and my inventory doesn't have to be cluttered for building anymore. And I'm like, none of this would work in vanilla, but something about the way it all fits together and kind of it has a bit of synergy in the mod pack. Like I was finding that a much more enjoyable building experience than I expected.
I really like that idea of having that bottleneck of the vanilla chest, but then just like, well, if I just put a bigger siphon or bigger hopper of stuff, not like a Minecraft hopper, but like just a hopper build of the materials that I need, feeding into that, then it almost gives you infinite building material. Like if you had stacks and stacks of things you needed to use, as long as you didn't empty the spot, if you always leave a spot for something to fill in the vanilla chest, then you're just golden. Like that's fantastic. It reminds me actually of the new dimensional storage in Satisfactory. They added that in the new release, and like it's in that game, it's a sci-fi game, so having a pocket dimension like makes sense. But in Minecraft, and you're dealing with magic, like having a walkie-talkie dial up your storage, like it feels sci-fi, but if you can put a magic spin on it, and like it's like the bags in Harry Potter, I can't remember what they're called, but they've got like a bottomless, you can put anything in them, and I feel like that's the kind of thing that you sort of have with you. It's really, really cool. I like that when mods have ways to facilitate creativity and push the building experience to be better. I think that's a welcome change I find with mods, especially if it's like what you said, you had to make some extra gameplay in order to get the most out of it. It wasn't just like a make win button. Like it didn't just give you a UI that you could access from anywhere. You had to get the walkie-talkie type item. You had to build the hopper system to make it all work the way that you wanted to. And I like that kind of stuff. I think that helps make it feel like something that you've done, not just a feature that someone has added that you're using, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
And I really like the aesthetics that you put into the library too. Like I was looking at those. I thought they were pillars at first, but now that I see that the dripstone detail work, like the molding and the wainscoting and stuff, like that looks fantastic. I would have never guessed that it was dripstone. And I love the fact that these chandeliers are so vanilla modeled. Like they really don't feel out of place. They really look like something that could be in Minecraft, considering that the chains are probably vanilla and then the chandeliers are just kind of modeled to match it and attach to it. In the same way that a vanilla lantern is meant to attach to a chain.
Yeah.
I think they look really, really cool. And the bookshelves look good too. Like the matted colors, the more subtle kind of worn leather, muted colors of the books look a lot more like what you'd expect in that kind of a mansion, as opposed to the bright purple and green and blue that you get in the vanilla texture pack for chiseled bookshelves. Do you have both in the mod pack, or is this the default for chiseled bookshelves?
I mean, that's just the regular bookshelves because they're around like enchanting tables and stuff. The chisel bookshelves aren't in that screenshot, but I can find another where they do appear. But yeah, there's definitely like a mix of different furniture mods in there that will add different colors of bookshelves and different kind of configurations of books and stuff as well. And I've seen stuff like that in the past where even if it's like connected textures, you start to find like new details that they add when a bookshelf expands to take up an entire wall instead of being a series of individual blocks. So yeah, there's a lot of smart stuff in there to make things look a little different. We're going to move on to some other smart stuff. We got some vanilla development news for you, starting off with a snapshot. Java Edition Snapshot 24W37A was released earlier last week. The changes include adding language support for High Norwegian, and the fact that thrown ender pearls now load and tick chunks. Ender pearls now ensure that the chunk they are in or travel into is always loaded and ticking. They also load chunks when crossing to a new dimension so that they can continue to travel. This ensures ender pearls can always land and makes cross-dimensional ender pearl traveling more predictable for players. As a result, ender pearls will now unload when a player logs out and reappear whenever that player logs back in, similar to how mounts currently behave. There are some mob conversion details in this changelog as well. To quote the changelog, in last week's snapshot, we fixed a bug related to which data gets transferred between mobs when converted from one type to another, for example, a zombie converting to a drowned. This week, we've reverted a few of these changes. Health, attributes, and loot tables are no longer transferred. The article goes on to list all the properties which are transferred when a mob is converted. We're not going to read them all here because it's a very long list, but it later includes properties for mobs which split into several other mobs as well, like slimes or magma cubes. It also lists the exceptions, which include XP, health, and villager data, as it was noted last week that the last batch of villager changes would kill villagers when they should have become zombies. When a zombie would attack them, they'd reach 0 health. Normally, they would convert into a zombie villager, but then the zombie villager would just die because the health attribute got transferred and it had no health left. Anyway, other technical changes in 24W37A include the data pack version now being 53. This brings changes to loot tables for archaeology and hero of the village, along with some tags, item component changes, and advancement triggers. Full details are available from the Minecraft.net changelog. The resource pack version is now 38, and this brings changes to GUI sprites, allowing some items to display differently when their inventory slot is highlighted, similar to how the bundle can change its appearance depending on which item you have highlighted in the bundle UI. Once again, full details available on the changelog. That's also in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com. The fixed bugs in 24W37A include boats crashing and braking to kill their passengers when falling certain distances. That's a long-remembered bug, and I think maybe reopened due to changes in a recent snapshot, but that's now been fixed again. The stonecutter ignoring anything over 64 when shift-clicking out of the product slot when a data pack allowed for larger stack sizes than 64. Zombies always killing villagers has been fixed by that earlier technical change. Shields no longer blocking incoming projectiles was an issue that's been fixed, and Elytra losing durability when the player takes damage. A lot of those are newer bugs just brought up in the last couple of snapshots that have been fixed once again. And many more bug fixes are listed in the Minecraft.net changelog, which you can find in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
The future of Minecraft's development was an article posted on September 9th, just after we finished recording our show last week. As we look towards our 16th birthday and beyond, we're here to talk about the future of Minecraft's development, how we're working to bring new features more regularly, and changes we're making to Minecraft Live, and more. More regular feature updates. Instead of providing one free update during the summer, as we've done in the past, we'll now be releasing a number of free game drops throughout the year. These game drops will vary in size and will bring you features to explore more frequently. The most recent example of this was the Armored Paws drop, but the article also cites visual changes to bats and the functionality of decorated pots added in 1.20.3 as the first of these, quote, gameplay drops. Alongside these regular content drops, our developers will be focusing on long-term initiatives to ensure we can continue to evolve Minecraft long into the future. The team is also working on a native PlayStation 5 version of Minecraft and has plans to improve the multiplayer experience, quote, to make it easier to find and connect with friends. There's a new format for Minecraft Live. Quote, we're changing the format of Minecraft Live and retiring the mob vote to bring you something new. Instead of doing one show per year, usually in October, Minecraft Live will now become a more focused broadcast and will happen twice per year. Each show will be packed with everything you need to know about the latest features we're working on, what's coming into testing, and the newest news from across the Minecraft franchise. A future shaped together is a section of the article that concludes by highlighting how important community feedback has been in recent developments like the Cherry Groves, Wolf variants, Wolf Armor, and the Armadillo. Quote, we are excited for a future of Minecraft in which we get to share more features with you regularly and in which your suggestions continue to become a reality.
So that news dropped basically right after we finished recording the previous podcast. So even after we finished the render distance, I think. So we had a little bit of a chat with it since the link got dropped in our live chat right after we finished recording. But it's really interesting to hear that the more frequent gameplay updates are now official. We've had a few of them recently, especially when it comes to the Armadillo changes. We knew that those were going to be arriving in a minor update instead of being held back for the next major version. And in the past, we've seen some small changes come through in decimal updates, like firework rockets boosting Elytra is probably my favorite example of this. That was added in the minor update to 1.11. It was the 0.1 release of 1.11, and that was added really as a reaction to players having to use a punch bow to accelerate themselves anywhere with Elytra. So it felt natural that it got included in a minor update, but was still a really major effect on gameplay. And so that approach to development has only really resurfaced recently, and the article notes that these updates are going to vary in size, so I wouldn't consider something like the reskin bats and changes to decorated pot functionality to be a huge deal on their own, but imagine if we got something like the Crafter in its own individual content drop, because they didn't feel like it fit the theme of a major update. One block can still be kind of a game changer. The Observer is another like redstone block that I'd say has a similar impact on like how players can interact with that side of the game. And I think this approach to development really frees the team up to develop features without concern for how they suit the theme of an update. I think we saw that with the Wild update probably most keenly, was players were they had a bit of a backlash about the name of the update because they didn't really consider the Deep Dark and the Mangrove Swamp changes to really be particularly connected features, and they thought that the Wild update theme would be a little bit better if it was unified by some more changes to the wilds of Minecraft, right? To the other biomes that are out there. And we know that they've been sitting on ideas for mobs and biomes that have been floated in previous like biome votes and mob votes at Minecraft Live that just never saw the light of day. They weren't voted in at the time, and they've said we're keeping these ideas back for potentially including them in the game in future. Well, now they can sort of include that stuff whenever they feel like it's ready for development, and if they think it's going to provide a decent addition to the game in the short term. So I think that's showing a fairly promising direction for development, especially if they can get a few ideas into the game a little sooner.
Yeah, I think more frequent update changes for vanilla content is fantastic. I think that we've mentioned that a number of times on the podcast over the years. I know I have. And I think it's better in the long run for the community than larger drops, because I would imagine that not everything developed at Mojang happens at the same speed or is at the same difficulty. Like if you've got an idea like the Deep Dark that's very difficult to get right, or the Crafter that's really complicated, but then you have something like the Armadillo that might come into fruition like quite quickly after some player feedback, or have something that's more aesthetic, like a biome change. And rather than have that hung up on waiting for the Crafter or waiting for something that still hasn't hit the game, like the bundle, to be grouped together in a themed update, they could just say, hey, look, the update changes to the Savannah are done. Let's just roll that out in a small content drop. And I think that that's great because, one, it will temper expectations of players. They'll get more content more often. And I think it also just makes the value of Minecraft feel that much higher, rather than waiting for 2 big content drops a year with a couple of little patches and these minor updates that we've seen in the last year, for more bug fixes really than content. It's going to be nice to just kind of have this steady-ish, also less kind of anticipation. Like if they're going to do it at whenever things are ready or whenever they've got some new ideas to do, then it's not going to necessarily be at regular intervals. They might attempt that, but it might be something a little bit more when it's ready and polished and good to go, as opposed to pushing the developers to rush to get something ready for a date only to have to patch it, a couple weeks later. And so I like that as well. I think the other thing is that we spend a lot of time on this show talking about snapshots and what's coming, and we can spend sometimes 2 months talking about features that are in snapshots before they actually hit the game. Sometimes it's even longer than that. And while you and I don't get burnt out on it, I do feel like sometimes the community will be just like, well, this feels like old news, or I've played around with this a lot in a snapshot. So when it does actually get to the vanilla game, it's cool and all, but it doesn't quite have the same level of excitement. Whereas if you've got some content coming, there's a snapshot, and then maybe 3 to 4 weeks later, that drop happens and that new content is in the game, then that's great. That's not long enough for people to kind of lose interest, forget about it, get bored by it. We see it a lot in the Minecraft community that people get into something in the snapshot and they're like, well, I've played a lot. And now it's just like, it feels like it's old news, even though it's not actually in the vanilla game yet. And I think this will help balance that in the community.
Yeah. Do you see any downsides to it? Because I've seen a few people saying, does this mean we're not going to get like major themed updates in the same way that we got the Nether update anymore? And I don't necessarily think that's true. I think we're still going to get, like, the article suggests they still have long-term plans for improving Minecraft, and that, I presume, means still making major thematic changes to the game where it feels appropriate. But I think there's just still a little bit of, like, maybe the clarity of it has not quite hit with everybody. Like, I think a few people are still not quite sure how this is going to change the way the game feels for everybody. Like, have you seen any other kind of potential setbacks with the way this is changing?
Well, I don't think that they're going to steer away from the themed updates, because there's some things that would warrant it, like an end update, for example.
Yeah.
Like that would be something you'd want to theme. I also think, to appeal to the Minecraft marketplace and the younger crowd that plays Minecraft, that those themed updates are going to be a lot easier to market and a lot easier to bring people in the same way that like a new Netflix series pushes subscribers to Netflix, and that's their main goal, right?
Yeah.
I feel like a new themed update to Minecraft that's big also pushes, game licenses and purchases and new players or returning players to come back and spend more time in the game. As far as downsides, I can't really think of much other than maybe the feedback that might take a little while to smooth out, which would be, this is kind of a lackluster update. And
yeah,
if something is really small, it's like, well, this isn't all that important. This isn't all that big. And Mojang would just have to say, yeah, that's what we said was going to happen. We said that they were going to be smaller and more frequent. Like, if you want them more often, they're not going to be as big. And I think that might be, I say, not a downside, but certainly a challenge in terms of the communication, which they can sometimes not be the best at Mojang, is that setting players' expectations that these are going to be small and frequent or more frequent, rather than players thinking, oh, cool, we're getting more frequent updates, but expecting the same amount of stuff in each one. And I think that if they get ahead of it and they say, like, look, we're focusing on, this is going to be like a small technical update, and it's called the, like the fall tech update, whatever they decide to call it. Or what do they call, like, the armor drop, the armadillo armor drop thing that they did.
Yeah.
Armored Paws. Yeah. So it's something like that. When you say Armored Paws, like, I am not expecting anything outside of Armadillo and Wolf Armor in that update. Like, nothing else needs to happen, because that's what you've called it. So if they're clear in that communication, I think that players will hopefully learn to expect. But I imagine there will be a bit of a pain period as we shift. We may also get a roadmap, and I think that would be a good thing for them to do as well in one of these new Minecraft Live versions that we're going to get. If they say, hey, we're planning on a couple of more content drops between here and Christmas. Like, even if they don't tell us when, they say like, yeah, we've got 2, maybe 3 small content drops coming between now and Christmas. Then that sets players' expectations. And I think that as long as they know it's feasible, and they talked about that before with, I think, the 1.18 update, where they say like, okay, we want to be a little bit more clear on what's possible and not overpromise and disappoint players. So if they underpromise and overdeliver and are clear about what's coming, I think that they'll hopefully, I'd say they won't avoid it entirely, but they'll mitigate the player misunderstanding and higher expectations I think they want.
I think giving them multiple Minecraft lives per year as well gives them the opportunity to talk to players on a much more direct basis, which is, I think,
100%.
really worth doing. And like, it's clear the team wanted to have a format where they updated players more frequently. Like on YouTube, they've tried a few different things, like having Minecraft Now or Minecraft Monthly, but sometimes they just dropped an episode of that between months because either they were too busy with something or they didn't have enough content to really make it worth players tuning in that month. And so the most recent Minecraft Monthly, I think, was for the Armadillo and Wolf Armor. It was a while ago, and then I think they said bundles at some stage as well, but then that was really the only real development update that we got, and then the rest of it has been more kind of behind the scenes, how do we make features kind of stuff, which I think is great for their YouTube presence, but they rarely had enough new stuff to bring to the formats that were supposed to be, here's the news about development. The news was typically, development is still continuing anyway, like, let's move on to highlight fan art and that kind of thing. So I think it's good that they've now got this notion of we're gonna spring a Minecraft live on you maybe when you least expect it. Like, it kind of creates that fun moment of community anticipation. It is not clear whether they're going to still do a Minecraft live this October, because this is around the time they would start announcing stuff for that anyway. So maybe they have some stuff to share about the next updates. Maybe they don't, and we'll find out. Obviously, we'll update you here on the show if we have any information about that coming down the pipeline. But the other major thing here is that they have ditched the mob vote. Naturally makes sense with the change of the format for Minecraft Live, since they're not going to be like putting polls up for mobs every 6 months, but also community sentiment on the mob vote has never quite matched the tone Mojang wanted to set for it, which is that you get to influence how the game is made and have like a new mob added to the game. The community has dwelled, especially recently, on here are the 2 mobs you're not getting. And I feel like that's the tone Mojang doesn't necessarily want, is the idea that they are taking away something that to the community feels like a fully fledged idea, that to Mojang just is probably still in the very early prototype brainstorming kind of stages. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for them to sunset, to completely retire the community vote side of things in favor of just getting community feedback on existing features, because that's worked really well with the Armadillo. Like, it's gone through a few iterations in terms of its aesthetics, in terms of the functionality, the way Wolf Armor helps with combat and how it helps protect the animals. And I think overall that's been a success story for the team, which the mob vote itself has always felt like something that felt incredibly divisive whenever it was happening.
I think that the mob vote is something that it spurs... it doesn't spur the conversations that you'd want it to. It spurs as you said, the division. And I think that because Mojang has that internal Bible of like what they want to do with the game, they're much better off, as you said, to find a mob that they're quite happy to add and then add it at like 80% and say like, well, here's where we think it's going to be. Give us some feedback and we can make some adjustments. And I think that that's a much better way to get the same community feedback, but instead of voting on which mob gets in the game, you're giving feedback, not necessarily voting per se, but you're doing the same sort of thing. You're giving them feedback on what you like and what you don't like. And instead of which mob, it's what features of this mob that's coming. So you know it's coming. There's no loss there. It's always a win. And then it's just a matter of like, well, what features does it have, not have? How does it act? How does it look? All that kind of stuff. And I think that that's a much better way to go. I agree. As far as the Minecraft Live changes, I mean, I have to see it to find out, but I know that I've always thought that the presentation could be shorter. I feel like in general, the Minecraft audience is a little bit older now. I know there's always new players coming in, and I know that the vocal minority is probably in their 20s. But I feel like the the length and presentation of Minecraft Live would benefit greatly from being more concise and having less fluff around stuff. And I always found that the mob vote was like, this is a minute and a half of information, and it would take 5 minutes or more for them to go through whatever skit or routine that they did in Minecraft Live. And I think that if Mojang adjusts the presentation a little bit and stops talking down a little bit to younger viewers and is more of like an even keel, still have it be fun. Like you can still have it be a good, creative, fun experience, but still have it be information heavy, fluff light. Be funny, but be funny about content, not stuff that just fills space and time, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. The only other thing I wanted to touch on with the new development cycle side of things is we're probably going to see a return to the days when modded Minecraft got stuck on one version for a while, if we're getting a lot of minor updates.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if, like, obviously modded Minecraft development works a little differently now. I think there are platforms that allow mod developers to move stuff forward, and with more of the game being exposed to data pack creators and stuff, it's possible that mods can integrate into that more easily, to the point where it's easier to update through versions. But we already see issues with the data pack version changing in snapshots, and a bunch of data pack creators groan, palm their foreheads, and then have to go back to like modifying the stuff they were working on. I have a feeling that modded might have another one of those eras where it is stuck on a version like 1.7.10 was the modded version for a really long time before 1.8 and everything could kind of move things forward. And I think we'll see that again. I think 1.10 did the same thing. Right now, mods are kind of hovering around the last version, like the last major update. So the mod pack I'm playing in right now is in 1.20. I think Vault Hunters probably is as well. Like a lot of the major mod packs are probably going to get stuck around a certain version because the minor updates will require them to develop a lot faster to keep up with, and it may just not be worth the hassle. Maybe wait for something that actually feels like a major thematic update before moving the modded scene on to the next major version. But I've heard that in a couple of places, and it wouldn't wholly surprise me if that's the case.
I guess it depends on what kind of mod it is too, and how it's implemented. Like if Mojang hasn't changed much about the back end of things, like so something like Sodium that we use on the Citadel, Lithium, some other performance mods, sometimes it's just a version number, and within a couple of days, especially because Fabric mods have access to snapshots. So those mods are really close to done during the snapshot cycle. And then when the version of Minecraft comes out, the mods are ready within a day or two. And that's usually enough for me for the performance mods. Now, content heavy mods like your fantasy mod pack or Vault Hunter, sure, those just take so much time in the development cycle of their own to then have to try to catch up to a new version might be a little bit too much. I think overall it's a win that the content is moving forward, because I feel like modded is still a vocal minority, even though I talk a lot about it on this show because of the performance things that we've added. Really, there's not a ton of content. I would say it's mostly UI and player experience and quality of life stuff that I've added. But we also have a lot of data packs. We have a lot of data packs, and it took me a long time to update a couple of our recipe heavy data packs when they changed the way that those worked. And it wasn't a huge change in terms of how it was coded, but when you've got several hundred lines of code in the different recipes for something like wood and a stone cutter and several new kinds of wood, like it just took a little bit of time to redo all that. Not difficult, just tedious. So I can understand there might be some pushback on more frequent stuff. But again, if it's not frequent changes to like the way data packs work, it's just the version number for the sake of keeping track, then like that's a simple fix. Like that's something that you can update your existing data pack and re-upload it to. I'll use Vanilla Tweaks as an example. That usually happens quite quickly. They're really on top of it, because quite often the way that the data pack works doesn't change. It's just that the version number does, and it just keeps it from working. And all I have to do is change a simple line of code, and you're good to go.
Yeah. Like it's one of those times though where I'm really happy that my main thing that I always come back to is a vanilla survival world with no modifications to it whatsoever, because I know that whenever new stuff comes out in full release, I'm going to be there day one, instead of having to wait for like a bunch of mods to update behind the scenes and data packs to like reach parity and that kind of thing. I guess the reason we're talking about this and not the snapshot is that there's nothing huge in the snapshot this week to my eyes. Like, the Ender Pearl changes I think are good for, in a broad sense, consistent player transport. I'm not certain how useful they would be for the technical community compared to existing chunk loaders, because the Ender Pearl seems to have the ability to load an individual chunk, whereas Nether portals have like a 3x3 area. I guess the only difference would be that Ender Pearls feel like there's still something that you can transport. If you've got like a water stream and bubble columns to prevent the Ender Pearl from landing anywhere, you could potentially move it around, and so maybe a moving chunk loader is a possibility. I don't know. Have you heard anybody else talking about these in the community? Because I've not really dove into the super technical side to see what's possible yet.
I did watch Exumavoid's video on the snapshot, and he did a really good explainer at the start of his snapshot video about what they're doing and how they're loading chunks and how that affects players and how it affects when you move to a new chunk, and if you throw an Ender Pearl through a portal, and how that works as well. So that I think is cool. I have seen a screenshot, but it wasn't the same video, of a bunch of Ender Pearls being suspended on the top of a bubble column. Yeah. Kind of bouncing around. And I know that there's like Ender Pearl transportation designs where you suspend an Ender Pearl and then you trigger a redstone to then drop the pearl and you get teleported back. And the trick is that, of course, you have to reload the Ender Pearl suspension before you then travel far afield again and get pulled back. Now, it said in the snapshot log, and I believe also in Exumavoid's video, that the Ender Pearls will get deleted if the player logs off. Yeah. So it's only going to work if you're there live. So that might be different. So that might break some of the old designs for Ender Pearl teleportation devices. I don't know the ins and outs of that. I've never really messed around with it. But the idea of loading a chunk specifically with just a bouncing Ender Pearl seems like it might be a better idea than using a nether portal, because if you've got other nether portals nearby and they're conflicting, or I wonder if it's going to be less resource intensive on the game. And I'm relying on players much smarter than I am in that realm to come up with some stuff that we can share on the show. Yeah. But I mean, the chunk loader was the name of the thumbnail for Exumavoid's video. So like, it's not that he explained how they could be used, but he sees the potential for probably niche use cases, but it seems cool. Like I don't think it's a bad thing. Now, I also caught the health changes on mobs, and I had heard via Twitch chat that some people were experiencing villagers turning into zombies that were dying instead of converting, which would be very frustrating. So it seems like the health transfer changes that they rolled out last week being rolled back in some cases is a good thing.
Yeah, well, maybe some folks in the technical community can reach out via email and let us know what the Ender Pearl buzz is about. We would love to hear from you. The email address, as always, is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com, and this is a chunk mail dispenser episode, so we're going to spend the rest of the episode answering a little bit of email that showed up in our inbox over the last couple of weeks. If you'd like to email the show, of course, keep your emails short and to the point. Let us know in a nice, handy subject line what it's about, and that helps us include us in the show more easily. Joel is going to read the first one from today.
This first email comes in from Wafer Knight, a landscape artist member of our community. Bundle-related mechanics is the subject. Hi, Joel and Johnny. I was listening to episode 313's bundle discussion, and I was wondering about the bundle mechanics and if they could be applied to any other items, like the bow. If you could place a few stacks of arrows into a bow, much like the bundle, perhaps this could be possible if you upgraded the bow to a bow and quiver, quote-unquote. This could make using tipped arrows or mending bows more viable as an option by decreasing their inventory clutter. Curious to hear your thoughts and ideas on other ways the new bundle mechanics could be utilized. Wafer Knight was shot by a skeleton while sorting her inventory.
Always happens. The skeletons and creepers will get you whilst you're in the interface, which I think is one of the reasons why they haven't really gone for stuff like backpacks in the past, is because you spend so much time sorting in interfaces and being unable to move. Unless you want to have like a... you know how in FPS games, like I think Fortnite does this, PUBG does this, where you can like wiggle the WASD a little bit so you can dodge to make sure that you don't get shot whilst you're like changing weapons and stuff. Imagine if you could keep your Minecraft inventory open, but you'd be like throwing stuff out of your inventory as you were running, you know? Like, be a great way to raid somebody's storage and really mess with them, is just to like open the chests as you run down and like pull out stuff as you went.
That'd be wild. I really like the ideas for bows in this email. And in most other RPGs that I can remember, I've had to carry arrows, but the arrows have like a separate inventory slot. They don't kind of take up one of your main inventory slots.
There's like an ammo spot somewhere in there, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
A lot of similar games like Terraria has the same thing. I'm pretty sure like games like Skyrim or whatever will have it. Yeah, for sure.
So having like a quiver slot in your main inventory would make a lot of sense for this. In early game, I can see collecting things being super helpful in this way, because it would keep the arrows out of your inventory. You're getting like one of everything. You're grabbing carrots and wheat and blocks and wood and leaves, and you're just grabbing all the stuff that you can in an early game. And so I can see not having to worry about arrows as actually being pretty helpful. It may also be a way for the game to communicate different kinds of arrows. So depending on how that quiver could be set up, it could indicate to players maybe visually somehow with different slots within the quiver for arrows, tipped arrows, that kind of stuff. Maybe that could indicate to the player, well, what's a tipped arrow? Like, how do I make that? Like, what's that process? I don't know what those are for. Something I'm going to look into later. And I think that could be a good way to kind of keep that within the game. Early mid-game, it may not be as much of an issue. However, in the end game, I do find myself when I'm building, when I have to do a quick run through the nether where I might encounter some ghasts, I then have to find a slot in my inventory for my bow and my arrows, because I normally don't carry them. I just walk up to stuff with whatever axe I have, and that's usually what I use. I don't even carry a sword anymore. It's pickaxe, axe, and shovel, sometimes a hoe, depending on what I'm doing. And then whatever mob approaches me gets the axe, and I just have to deal with it that way. Sometimes if I'm sleeping overnight and I've got a bunch of mobs in an area that I'm working in, I'll grab the bow out of the chest. But again, like I often have to dump something on the floor in order to use it. So I think that in endgame it would be helpful there too. As far as other things that come to mind, I found actually in thinking about this, what ended up happening was that I was just thinking about different uses for the bundle as opposed to different uses for the bundle mechanic. So potions, ender pearls, mine carts, enchanted books, like a bunch of stuff that doesn't stack was kind of what I was going to with the bundle. However, I don't know what this could mean for crossbows. How do you add a quiver to a crossbow? That's not necessarily the same thing. What could that mean? And I thought that maybe crossbows could be used to shoot potions. Like maybe there's like a slingshot crossbow that you could upgrade the crossbow to and use it to shoot non-arrow items in different ways. Snowballs, eggs, potions. I think that could be kind of useful, but I don't know what that would look like and whether or not the crossbow is a candidate for this kind of thing, because it already has some functionality to it that's different than the bow to separate it out. But I think that this would help the bow feel a little bit more modern, not that like modern in terms of history, but like modern video game, compared to the crossbow. I think that the bow, it's simple and it's straightforward, but I think that adding a little bit more functionality to it could help it feel like 2024 Minecraft a little bit better.
Imagine now that they've made these changes to ender pearls, if you could load an ender pearl into a crossbow and shoot it like 3 times as far. You could just imagine slingshotting an ender pearl into the distance and like landing, chunks away, regions away in your world. It'd be super fun. Like I'm into the idea of being able to apply arrows to the bow. I think the difficulty you would run into is switching them on the fly in any kind of meaningful way, because to open the bundle and to select a specific item from it, you've got to open your inventory GUI, use number keys, or I guess the scroll wheel now, because number keys I think was reverted, and Like, you've got to have fairly fine motor skills to be able to do that on the fly with a bundle, much less in a combat situation where you might want to switch from, say, healing arrows to harming arrows, because zombies aren't affected by harming arrows. They'll actually get healed a little way by them, but healing arrows will do twice as much damage. So you want to switch between those depending on what kind of mob you're using, if you're thinking tipped arrows specifically. And so, yeah, I think there's potential, I think, even to use the standard bundle for making tipped arrows way more viable, because if you just choose 2 different types and store 32 of them in a bundle, all you've got to do is make sure that they are first in your inventory, and then that means they'll be selected over any arrows that you have later on in the inventory, left to right, top to bottom. So if you just put a bundle in the top left and save a slot next to that for swapping your arrows in and out, you might actually find some decent use out of tipped arrows using a bow, which is something I'm going to try next time I'm in a Snapshot and I get my hands on a bundle. But I think being able to select them from the bow itself would make sense, but would require some sort of UI or hotkey or something that could allow you to switch ammo easily. Otherwise, it has the potential to get a little bit complex. And again, you've got to work out how that works on mobile devices and other control schemes. But I think it'd be really interesting to see stuff like this if they revise that combat update idea that they had a while ago that Jeb was testing in snapshots on the Reddit, and add in some of the Bedrock parity changes from Bedrock Edition combat, where there is no cooldown on how quickly you can be hit by another projectile once you've been hit by one. So multi-shot crossbows are part of the meta, because if you get multi-shot, you fire 3 harming arrows at once. If you have like harming 2 potion-tipped arrows, you can one-shot a player pretty easily. I think you can even one-shot like a Ravager or something that has like absurdly high health.
Wow.
So like there is room for stuff like that to re-enter the meta, I think, if they make combat changes. And you can imagine combat changes also bringing ideas like this, where players can be a lot more selective about what ammo they're using with which projectile weapon in order for it to be effective. So maybe watch this space. I can see ideas like that coming down the pipeline in future. Next, we're going to move on to our second email. This one comes in from 12 Hour Half Day, who's also a landscape artist member of our Discord. The subject is incorporating redstone into a build. Hi Joel and Johnny. One thing that really interests me about building in Minecraft is using redstone to make a build more interesting by adding hidden doors, puzzles, movement, and other aesthetic ways of using redstone. What are your tips when it comes to incorporating redstone to add flavor, life, and more to a build? 12 Hour Half Day was crushed into paste in a piston feed tape.
As someone that's a little claustrophobic, nope.
Yeah,
nope,
not so much.
No, thank you. For me, movement in Minecraft, even implied movement, I find very handy in builds. Things like doing a crane where something is like halfway up, being hoisted from a raft to a dock is really effective. But you could use Minecraft redstone to add things like minecarts darting around in a mineshaft build, even if they're not doing anything. They're just kind of like on a timer, and every once in a while one zips by. I've seen Good Times with Scar use that on several occasions. In a factory build, you could add a bunch of things like pistons, having a piston with a block and then unblock the smoke from a campfire so that it goes up and then it stops and it goes up and then it stops. And if you can't see where that's happening, or if it's far enough away that you can't hear it, then it just looks like steam kind of being released off and on. And those are really easy ways to do it. You can get more robust with it. You could use pistons to move things, having bridges, extender, or not. Lots of crazy piston doors out there for people that want to do that. I also really like the idea of using observers and different chains for lighting. You've got redstone lamps. You now have the new copper bulb, which you can change the intensity of depending on how it's oxidized. And you can use observers to very quickly create a sequence of lights. You can do different patterns. It doesn't have to be a straight line. I would love to do something like that in my sci-fi area that's currently unplanned, but I have this idea for like a major, like a power core, and having lights and energy look like it's flowing towards it, I think would be really cool, as if it's like powering up, or vice versa. You could have something that looks like it's powering your area, and maybe the energy as light is being sent out from it in different waves and different patterns. Landing strips for aircraft, stuff like that you can do. That's pretty cool. You could also do the same thing with pistons and something like a frog light or a shroom light, where if you are covering it up with a block and then revealing it in sequence, then you would have the two things. You'd have the movement and you'd have the light being revealed. And depending on how you have that in sequence, it could be very, very cool or something like that. I don't really have anything else because I don't get into Redstone quite that deep in terms of setting up a lot of movement. I have more functional Redstone right now on the Citadel. What are your ideas for doing stuff like that, Johnny?
Well, I have a couple of plans coming up for this build I'm planning in Survival Guide, which I finally started to nail down the theme for. I want to do a lot more with wind charges and have the entire city be something like wind powered. Think like a steampunk sort of era of technology, but with wind power instead of steam power and that kind of like clockwork aesthetic. So a lot of fans everywhere and things like that. And I've seen a lot of folks on Hermitcraft recently figure out that if you throw a bunch of dispensers in together and have a pressure plate for the player to step on, you can launch yourself like hundreds of blocks up in the air with relative ease. And there's stuff like that again, like for player movement is really, really fun. Like I remember having tons of fun with just slime block player launch pads back in the day, being able to get up from one like level of a build to another. If you want to hit the second floor in style, you just run over a slime block pad, run over a pressure plate on the way, and then after a little bit of a delay, the slime block launches you up. And I think that's even got more consistent in recent updates thanks to like some redstone timing stuff and player position stuff being calculated more accurately. But I think with wind charges, you can do bits and pieces like that. You can move items around with them. You can move mobs around with them. And there can even be mechanics that have like proximity detection in tandem with those, not just with the breeze mob itself, but with skulk sensors triggering stuff when the player gets close. So it doesn't even need to be going off constantly, right? So my plans for the next survival guide build are going to involve moving stuff around using wind charges and seeing like what's possible with that. And the thing to remember is that a lot of that can be done with low complexity redstone. Like a dispenser and a pressure plate is not especially high tech. And I think when a lot of people think of redstone, they get intimidated by the scale of redstone systems work that they've seen in the past, and like, ordering systems for shops that take like banks of redstone comparator signal going this way and that in the background. And it doesn't always have to be that. Like, I think the most complex thing that I tinker with most of the time is just timers, and those are pretty easy to make. You can make a short clock with just a few repeaters and redstone dust, or you can make like a etho hopper clock that has a very configurable amount of time between reactions. And piston doors don't have to be huge. Dispensers and slime blocks and stuff like that can add a lot of life. Even the fact that you're able to dispense armor stands now and have those go past like on a water stream conveyor belt kind of thing, having those go around in a circle, maybe add armor to them and then break it at the end, and it can look like a factory line where a set of armor is being assembled and then packaged at the end of the line or something, right? You can do stuff like that and then just have hoppers feed everything back into the dispensers and then have it go round again, and suddenly it looks like you're making infinite suits of armor when really it's just the same 4 or 5 items being recycled. The other thing I've done in Survival Guide is a furnace array that's hooked up to an observer detecting when one of the furnaces switches on, the last one on the line, and that sends a signal to a piston which pushes a hay bale up underneath a campfire in the chimney, and so whenever the auto smelter is running, the smoke rises higher than when it's off. And like once everything is done, I noticed that like the smoke from the chimney has stopped drifting up. That not only adds like a practical signal for me to know when my auto smelter is done, it also feels realistic to the type of activity that's going on in there, because the furnaces would be producing more smoke by virtue of them still smelting all of this stuff. So I think that's a really neat way, and that was a suggestion from a viewer. I forget exactly who, so apologies, but like I think I want to at least note that people have really cool ideas for incorporating a bit more of that practical life into those redstone builds, and that comes up in places that you wouldn't otherwise expect. So the community has tons of great ideas. I recommend going looking for fun details that other people have built in that regard.
One of my favorites in recent years, actually, that doesn't involve a lot of redstone, it's more mob mechanics, is that Tango Tech did a Santa's Workshop a couple of years ago and used a villager that you couldn't see in a minecart being pulled back and forth, and a bunch of baby zombies that were name tagged, And whenever the villager would move from one side of the room to the other, the baby zombies would run back and forth, chasing it.
Yes,
and
I remember it.
And it just looked like busy elves running back and forth in Santa's workshop. But the closest that you can get is, of course, little green baby zombies in Minecraft, and it was really fun. And just he was tickled by it, and just those kind of out of the box or outside of the box projects are really cool. And again, don't involve a lot of redstone knowledge. Like, it's more about knowing what's possible mechanically in the game, not necessarily that you need to be a redstone genius to pull that kind of stuff off.
Yeah, for sure.
Our next email comes in from Brian C. Mob vote improvements. Hello, Joel and Johnny. How would you improve on the past mob vote mobs, such as the Sniffer, the LA, or the Phantom? The Armadillo made me realize how much potential mob vote winners can have. Brian C. I thought this was a fitting email to grab and throw into the show today, given that the changes that we announced to the mob vote going away in Minecraft Live. Off the top of my head, I'd improve the Allay's accuracy when dropping items on a note block. I've never found it overly useful, and part of my, I guess, perfectionist brain just kind of wished that they would do something a little bit more precise, so you could use them in that way a little bit better. I think also the AI for following a player with the Allay could be a little bit better. However, that's more of a third party or like outside observation. It's not so much I've had problems, but I've watched other players have problems with the Allay. I don't know what the limits are for the programming on that, though, so I don't know whether that's something that could be improved or whether they're dealing with some limitations within Java, etc. I don't know that we could, quote unquote, improve phantoms. I don't know what more I'd want them to do or not do, but I'm on a blank. And I really like sniffers. I don't really have much feedback for sniffers. What about you?
I think there's a few things that could be done with sniffers. To piggyback off your Allay idea, I still think tuning Allays to different instruments or note block notes could really open them up for improvement. That would make them so much more viable for more organic solutions to item sorting. But I wonder if they're being held back from becoming too powerful by doing that, because it may be that players would never make anything redstone based again if they could have lots of little critters kind of going back and forth and shuffling things around to the tune of, an absolute discord from all of the note blocks being played at once and, in different instruments and sound sets. But I would love to see more done with Allays to be able to fine-tune them, because I agree, like, not just the inaccuracy of the way they throw things, but the fact that you can't really have them split stuff up for you. They just exist for collection more than they exist for sorting, which is sort of the vision I think a lot of people had for them initially. As far as the sniffer goes, I would love to use sniffer eggs aesthetically. And that's something we mentioned during the lead up to sniffers being introduced. Like, I think I would personally prevent them from hatching on every block in the game. Similar to how turtle eggs don't hatch unless they're on sand, I would want sniffer eggs to maybe only hatch if they were on like a dirt variant or just on moss, potentially, if you want to really limit it. Because while that's not super intuitive, because the sniffers drop the eggs, they don't lay them on sand the way turtles do, it still allows players to use them in more creative ways, where if you place a sniffer egg literally anywhere, even in the air, I'm pretty sure it still hatches within like 40 minutes of being loaded.
Right.
So there's not really many options in that respect. I'd also still love to see more flowers and crops dug up by the sniffer. I still think that's something they could introduce in future, and there just hasn't been enough time yet for them to think, well, we're going to add something new to the game. Why not give it to the sniffer as another thing to add value there? I think the main issue right now is that players don't feel like they have enough utility because the plants themselves just produce dye, and aesthetically speaking, not everyone wants to work with torch flowers or pitchers. So maybe sniffers could also be used to dig up like buried treasure. Like if they can find treasure chests, if maybe not dig them up, but they sort of sniff around the block where you think the treasure chest might be buried on the beach. Or maybe they're better at getting rewards from suspicious sand in desert temples, and even though they're big and bulky, you could kind of bring the sniffer along with you in an archaeological dig, and then whenever you find a new layer of suspicious sand, since they're good at finding items as delicate as seeds, you can imagine the sniffer being like your archaeology buddy and pulling stuff out of the ground when you're like too busy being careful brushing everything. So I think that could be a fun way of incorporating sniffers and tying them into the rest of the update of which they were originally a part.
One thing that could be interesting with sniffers too is if you brought them to different biomes and had them do their thing. To your point about digging up different flowers, if they were digging up different things in different biomes, so like maybe they don't dig up different flowers or plants in the desert, but maybe they dig up different things in general, like different rewards. Maybe that's a good way to get slow renewable sand, is just having sniffers dig in the sand because they dig. That's what they do, and they just they find more sand. I wonder what would happen if you brought a sniffer to a savanna or a jungle, or the nether, the end. Like what did they dig up there? That could be kind of fun too, and help with more exploration and kind of moving players around, which I think that Mojang has wanted to do more recently with updates like the armor trim updates, things like that. I didn't really think much beyond like the actual mobs, but in terms of things like drops, or even improvements to existing drops. Like, we've talked before about pitcher plants being able to be kept at different phases. I think that, maybe a future note for Mojang would be like, if you're going to add new plants to the Sniffer's repertoire, then have it give players options in the different growth phases where you could use it for different things, because we've got that suspension of disbelief that happens in Minecraft. And anytime that you can introduce a thing, whether it's a plant or a block or an item, that kind of doubles as something else or looks like it could be used in a couple of different ways, it's always a really fun, creative thing for the players to mess around with. And in thinking about things like the armadillo or the allay, armadillo is already very specific, and I don't think you'd want to add like more to what they might drop. The phantom membrane is fine, I guess. I don't really use the slow falling potion. I guess a lot of it is end game stuff that I just don't really find much of a use for. With phantoms, I just kind of wonder if there could be something more that a phantom could indicate, like rather than just showing up when you haven't slept, if a phantom could help you find something, like point towards maybe they also naturally spawn over lava pits if you haven't found one and you're looking for lava. I'm just thinking about different ways that you could use phantoms that you can see and hear from a distance to indicate like some sort of like something is happening here, you need to go look here. Maybe phantoms hover above geodes or something like that. You have no idea how deep it is, but like maybe that could be an indication. Just little things like that might add value to them, because they don't have a lot of value to players right now, and I think that's one of the reasons why they get a lot of hate in the community.
I like the idea of you staying up like extra late because you're trying to find a geode and just waiting for them to spawn and seeing whereabouts they spawn. That's a fun one. Well, our last email for today's show is going to come in from Ethan P., whose subject is teleporting from Bedrock to Java. Hey Pix and Joel, I'm a long-time listener, first listened to episode 100, and wanted to know if you had any tips on switching from Bedrock Edition to Java Edition, as I've been playing Bedrock for 4 years, and wanted to switch to Java because of certain game mechanics and farms. Are there any mod packs, texture packs, or data packs you can recommend? Are there any important differences that I should be aware of? Loving the weekly show, keep it up. Ethan was squished to death because he didn't know about entity cramming. That's
another squish.
I know.
Another squish.
The teleporting from Bedrock to Java, in the context of this week's news, I was like, that's a heck of an ender pearl throw. That's like, you threw an ender pearl in Bedrock so hard you ended up in a different version of the game. Like, good job.
Gives crossplay a whole new meaning, right? You throw the ender pearl on an Xbox and you end up in the PlayStation in the new version.
Yeah, right. So I think for this one, my usual advice, which I'll give whenever people ask me, like, people are getting into Java Edition in general, they say, oh, what mods should I get? And I think there's this notion of Java, because it's a platform that's been heavily modded for many years, people think that you can't really play the game without mods. Like, there are some sort of quality of life mods that are essential. My usual advice is to get familiar with vanilla before you jump into modded, especially when it comes to gameplay mods specifically. I know we often recommend performance mods, and that's a good idea if you're working on a lower end system, but you would be surprised how different Java and Bedrock are, even for virtually identical games. And so I think it's important to get to grips with what feels different, what acts different, before you really jump into modded Minecraft stuff that's going to change the game entirely. And I'm even including data packs in that. If you look into how mob spawning works in Java Edition, for one thing, you'll find it changes your whole approach, like how mob farms are created and how you can limit mob spawning in an area is different, because on Bedrock it's so much dictated by your simulation distance, whereas on Java it's really not. remember that the Wither fight is easier, but Pillager raids are harder, at least when done the intended way. And have fun using the offhand. I think those are my major recommendations for somebody switching to Java Edition. But outside of that, yeah, I think in terms of resource packs, data packs, texture packs, the ones I typically roll with are just the ones that improve visibility. So things like Vanilla Tweak's lower shield and lower fire, I think are really nice to make sure that those don't obstruct your screen too much, because the shield can get very large and in the way, and it's nice to kind of tuck it out of the way so you can see a bit more of what's going on around you. And likewise, lower fire animations take up maybe like 50 to 60% of the screen by default, and I find that they're a little bit obstructive. But honestly, as somebody who plays the majority of their time in vanilla, those are the only resource packs I even play with anymore. The rest of the time, if I'm introducing data packs, it's for experimental purposes, or I'm playing on a modded server with some friends and just introducing recipes like the bundle or something like that. Joel, you have a bit more familiarity with performance mods, so do you want to at least clue people into what you're using on the Citadel?
Sure. A lot of it has to do with the caffeine mods, lithium, sodium. They're all fabric mods that help improve frame rates, rendering, that kind of stuff. I would not delve into it if you don't need to. Like if you've got a high-end PC right now, then you should be fine for that kind of stuff. The reason we use them on the Citadel is because the people that play on it have a range of PC specs. They've improved over the years, but when we first started, it was a wide range, and it made sense to make the server as lag friendly as possible and as user friendly as possible. And I also enjoy things like shaders for screenshots as a content creator, so I wanted to use different things like that. So we have like Iris, and there's Continuum and a couple of other different things like that. I have a link actually in my Twitch chat that leads to a spreadsheet that has all of the mods that we use on the server, and then all the mods that I use locally. A lot of them overlap. Like sometimes you can have them on the server, then also on your client as well if you're just doing single player, but sometimes in tandem they actually help. I would say that I agree with like exploring the vanilla game before you look into mods, because one of my big beefs with mods, especially content mods, is that it's often someone else's idea about what they did to make Minecraft quote unquote better, and you may not agree with that. And I think that getting to know the vanilla game gives you the idea of like, okay, now I know where the limitations are, or where I really feel frustrated, or I wish I could do this differently. And then you can say, okay, well, now I want to find a mod that gives me tables and chairs because I really wanted them and I couldn't really do what I wanted to in Minecraft with them. That's a good example. I think that when you have those kind of quality of life things that are nagging at you a little bit after some time in the vanilla game, it's a great opportunity to go to a site like vanillatweaks.net and check out the data packs and the resource packs. So that doesn't require a mod loader. They're not mods, they're data packs. And they are things like lower shield, lower fire, texture on the side of dirt blocks is lower. There's all these different things that you can kind of pick and choose which you want. So it's not one big Vanilla Tweaks mod pack or data pack that changes a bunch of stuff. You can kind of put your own little pack together. If you don't like their texture for dripstone, you don't have to use it. Like you can just kind of pick and choose what you want. And I think that that's a great way to approach. A lot of the stuff that I've used as far as data packs are like simple recipe tweaks, like being able to turn string into wool and vice versa, being able to turn netherwort into a block and vice versa. It just helps with storage in the end game. So there's little things like that that I think are really useful for data packs that will, I think, help your gameplay, especially if you happen to be an adult that doesn't have a lot of time. You know, like if you're getting into Java and you're like, I don't want to spend hours and hours and hours crafting these things. I want it just to be a little bit more user-friendly. Then you can look at some recipes and stuff that do that. Also visually, things like dark UI, I find a lot easier on the eyes if you're going to be playing the game a lot. So things like that in the resource area is great. Quieter ghasts, quieter mobs, the ability to silence a mob. If you get a zombie in your base for a specific reason, but he's just groaning all the time, you can use a name tag to silence them with a data pack. So those kind of things I think are really, really fun. As far as the vanilla gameplay, though, I think that one of the things that you should check out would be how redstone works in Java. I have recently been having a lot of fun with redstone, especially with all the new additions over the last couple of updates. And I can recommend players like Mumbo, Tango Tech, and Impulse SV as great places to start, because it's not that they're doing just tech stuff. They're using tech stuff, sort of like the email we got earlier from 12-hour half day about Redstone and adding movement and puzzles and themes. Because these guys are doing longer Let's Plays, then you've got more inventive ways to use Redstone and more fun ways to try and utilize it. And I think that's really important, because it's a more accessible way of learning than it is to just kind of drive in and try to do like a piston door when you maybe not even need one. Like maybe you just want to do something a little bit more small. And I think that these guys have some great Let's Plays where they're using Redstone in really fun ways, but also can be very technical too. I think that you can also go into Ilmango and IanXO4 on YouTube, and I'll have links to everybody in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com. Those are for more technical explanations on how a farm might work, how to get the most out of a small build or a focused Redstone build. And I think that could really open up your eyes as to what's possible in Java Minecraft, especially if you're used to Redstone and how it works in Bedrock Edition.
I think one last thing to be aware of when it comes to switching from Bedrock to Java is that because Java doesn't have a marketplace, there are specific sites that it's probably worth remembering for like mods, data packs, resource packs, that kind of thing. VanillaTweaks.net we've mentioned a few times. I typically go to Planet Minecraft if I'm looking for maps to download, texture packs, Minecraft skins sometimes shared there, that kind of stuff. If you're looking for mods, I would recommend Modrinth first and then CurseForge, but there are a lot of other sites out there that try to imitate Minecraft mod downloading sites and try to capitalize on searches when there's a new version of Minecraft out and people are looking for shaders downloads for it. A lot of sites will advertise their shaders just to get clicks on the site and then not have legitimate links to those. So I think it's always worth keeping your ear to the ground as far as the community goes and making sure that you're heading to a reputable site when you're looking to take your Minecraft experience that next step, because it's not as tightly controlled as the Bedrock marketplace is by any stretch. Hopefully that'll set you on the right path. In the meantime, that's where we're going to end this episode of The Spawn Chunks. Thank you all for sending in those emails. Lovely emails this week. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me. The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks, where joining at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week. You can also listen to our monthly Minecraft Hangouts and even participate if you've got some screenshots to share about what you've been doing in Minecraft that month. Next one of those is coming up right at the end of September, so stay tuned for the dates in the Discord. We have 311 patrons right now, which is up to from last week, and there is always room for more. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Gundar H. Striker, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, as well as the video version on YouTube. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is available on the spawnchunks.com, and the Patreon-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide will be returning very soon. I also stream at 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series, but lately I've been playing on the Fantasy Minecraft SMP, and also playing a bit of Elden Ring on the side. I also voice the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick search over on YouTube. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be linked through joelduggan.com. That includes the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. I have been continuing to watch The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and hopefully we'll have some more thoughts on that on the show soon. I'm also streaming a little bit more often on Twitch right now at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan. Satisfactory 1.0 has been released, so I'm putting a lot of time in Satisfactory. I am also playing Minecraft. Both playthroughs right now are very technical, so if you're into that kind of thing, check us out over at twitch.tv/JoelDuggan.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but it's all loaded by ender pearls.